let's talk about how to talk about these things. Whether your specific kink was mentioned tonight or whether, you're into something completely different. Maybe that's something really vanilla that you don't necessarily feel like fits into this conversation. It's just worth noting that being able to talk openly and honestly about your partner or about your sexual interest with your partner is just how you have good sex. I mean, I say this all the time in my clinical work with my clients, that there's no such thing as somebody who's good at sex. I'm sorry. I know that a lot of people will disagree, but I'm going to go ahead and make the argument that there is nobody who is truly good at sex. There are only people who are really good at communicating, who are really good and graceful at being able to perhaps anticipate their partner, who are able to connect with their partner. It's all about being comfortable and capable and competent in discussing these kinds of things. So let's get a little bit into that, Amberly. As a therapist, I work with a lot of different people on a lot of different things, but maybe 10% of all of the conversations I have basically start with, well, how do I tell my partner that I'm into X? Or, how will I ever find a partner who's okay with X? And I guess I'm curious what insights you can offer us about how to unpack these things.
Yeah, sure. So it comes from you have to you don't have to be comfortable with yourself. I mean, well, you should be, and I want you to be. But you don't have to be comfortable with yourself in order to be able to start, I guess is what I want to say. I want you to be. You should be. Let's keep you there.
No, I've said on this show 100 times, if I've said it once, that the idea that you have to love yourself before anybody else can love you is fucking bullshit. We want you to love yourself. We're definitely encouraging that, and it definitely will make your relationship better.
Yeah.
But this idea that you have to achieve a certain level before you're allowed to enter into the dating world or before you're allowed to be loved is just nonsense.
100%. I would say, first of all, whatever it is that you're interested in, first, before you go asking anybody to join it with you, get a little education under your belt. I don't mean you don't need a degree in ABDL. You don't. I
have yet to find a university that offers one, and don't think I haven't Googled it.
I fucking love you. But yeah, you don't have to do 4 years of research. Honestly, even just 2-3 weeks of reading some erotica that FetLife has some on there. Literotica, read what other people who are into this type of stuff, what they write about. See if you can find an author that's done a prolific amount, because chances are they have done a lot of research into it. I'm not saying they're right or they're wrong, but at least read about how other people experience it. Look up the history. We're getting more and more information on different kinks and kinks that people feel are very taboo. They don't really talk about. We're getting more and more of that on the internet. Go search out this type of stuff and get to know a little bit about it, because that's going to make it a lot easier for you to be able to have a conversation. I like to tell people we don't fear things. We are just not as educated as we feel like we should be in order to talk about them. But when you know a ton about something, you have a confidence at least about that particular subject matter, which will make it easier for you to then be able to relate it to somebody that you want to. So if you have a significant other and you want to be like, hey, I really want to experience, I don't know, financial domination. I want you to take over my bank account. And anytime I want to have a Snickers bar, I have to kneel on rice and pray to you. I don't know. Do you? But get that.
Somebody's writing down that example right now. That thing off the top of your head. Somebody's like, yep, that was it. That was the thing.
That's one of my go-tos. But yeah, so have somebody you have to be able to understand it and have the education in order to be able to articulate exactly what you're looking for, which make you a lot more comfortable in knowing, okay, this is where I want to get to. Let's try this to see if I can get them to understand what I'm looking for. And you can kind of baby step your way into it if you have a significant other. to the question of, and I get this a lot, someone who doesn't have a significant other, they don't have a partner that they can try these things with. I mean, back in 2005 when I started, I had some deep empathy and sympathy, but no more. Nay, nay. Fet life is a thing. Um, there's all kinds of kinky singles, and I know Sesta Foss has put a kibosh on some of them, but we have Twitter, we have Reddit, we have online communities that you can find to find people that, you know, are into this type of thing. And yeah, if you live in Tuscaloosa, Oklahoma, it might be really hard for you to find someone
Mm-hmm.
who's into that type of kink. But do start in those areas because maybe you'll find someone who lives an hour outside of you. Or maybe they live 3 hours and you guys can meet once a month or something like that. But yeah, go into online communities and talk, because chances are, if you feel like you're into some pretty weird shit, you're not alone. Like,
Yeah, that's why the internet was invented, right? Is just to connect people with very, very specific fetishes with one another. Well, I mean, if you are in a relationship and your kink is not necessarily a vital part of your sexuality, but it's perhaps something that you would like to share with your partner, what's the right moment to unpack that, or to start talking about these things? I mean, is that first date conversation? Is that 10th date, or how does that look?
I wouldn't say it's first date. I keep my first dates very, if you think it's first date, do you. I don't know if I'm comfortable sharing that type of stuff first date. But so every type of kink that someone has typically has, like, there's a lot of commonalities between people that are into certain types of things.
Mm.
For example, black male fetish. I'm not sure what that noise was. But for example, black male fetish. Oftentimes people that are into that typically have some foreboding parental guardian figure that in their family. They have a lot of there was a lot of what's it called, religiosity in their background. And if you're into, so what I'm trying to say is, whenever I have like a black male client that's like, I want my partner to get into that, um I will tell them, well, what is the background of that partner? Oh yeah, they had a really religious background. Ask them if they had a very imposing parental figure, and
Mm.
if they felt like they were being forced to do stuff throughout their lives that they don't normally do, and ask them, how did that make them feel? Can we do that as a role play? You're not asking for blackmail fetish in that case, but it's something along the lines of, and it's a great way to kind of gauge whether or not that is something that you could add. If they're
So maybe start broad, and then depending on how that goes, how that feels, lead into the specific.
100%. Thank you. You summarize things way better than I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's the therapist training, but yeah, I often think in terms of food. You know, I love connecting sexuality to food because it's just such a simple metaphor for the way our bodies crave certain things, the way our past experiences and our biology impact and interplay the things that we're looking for. But also, you can, ask your partner, do you enjoy like pan Asian food as a general rule? Do you want to get some Chinese takeout? And then after a certain point, do you particularly like Japanese food? Do you like sushi? Do you want to try, this octopus tentacle? That's a line of thought that I think most people are familiar and comfortable with. Whereas if your partner just walked right up to you and was like, "Hey, want to eat a sea urchin?" I know a lot of people would be a little bit initially squigged out by that.
I would be one of them. But yeah, actually, it's funny because I didn't think about it this way. I used an analogy with a client recently, who was just like, no, that method won't work. And I'm like, okay, so what if you were going to ask me to go kayaking with you without asking me to go kayaking with you? He goes, what's the first question you would ask? He's like, do you like water? Yeah, I love water. Like, I love going swimming. Okay, you like going swimming. Um, do you like boats? Okay, yeah, I like boats. okay, would you like to be on a boat with me?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's kind of like going along those lines. Like, for example, ABDL, um, do you like some sort of fantasy where someone um is controlling you? Do you
Hmm.
like can we play some sexual Simon Says? Phase one, and then you just keep progressing and go next step, next step, next step. Hey, okay, it seems like you might be open to ABDL. Boom. Because a lot of people don't know um uh uh a lot of people don't uh, I'm trying to find the right words for it. Sorry. A lot of people don't want they don't again, as you said, if you want to eat octopus tentacle, that just squigs them out. But again, kind of if you kind of build up to it, they might be open to it because they've never actually thought about eating it. And they never thought about the fact that, I mean, I eat snails. Why is it weird that I eat snails? Why is it not weird to eat snails, but it's okay? It's not okay to eat octopus tentacle.
Sure.
I eat calamari. Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in all of this, I think it might be important to kind of lay out. We're not talking about like, well, how do you manipulate your partner into saying
No.
yes? Because this conversation isn't about tricking anybody. It's just about the way that we communicate. Nobody wants to be in a relationship where there are just no boundaries and you just pour your guts out onto somebody. You want to have shared experiences, and so maybe you do have go to an Asian restaurant together, and then you have a nice sushi night, and then you kind of work up to these things in a lot of ways. And especially if this is a new fetish for you yourself and you're wanting to explore in that way, you should both be kind of working up to these things. So it's important to be in a relationship where you feel like you're allowed to ask, maybe not just immediately, would you eat this sea urchin, but a little bit of like, hey, do you want to try this new restaurant? Are you interested? Are you curious about this? You want a relationship where you feel like you have permission and you're allowed to ask without getting punished for just the simple question. But also, you want to be in a relationship where every question is an actual question. And if no is not an acceptable answer, then it was never really a question, it was a demand. And so I think it's important to keep that kind of ethic and that focus on consent as we're talking about all of this. But I'm curious from you, Amberly, what some of the other maybe values or beliefs or just ethics that are important to have like well in hand when you're bringing up a conversation like this.
Oh, just put me on the spot. It's fine. Um, I'm here for it. But yeah, it goes back to so I'm going to use the I go back to blackmail a lot.
Who doesn't?
That's what I'll do. Who doesn't? Um, there's this really popular financial dominatrix named Sierra Lynch, and it took me reading one of her blog posts where she was like, I'm not doing blackmail anymore. I'm doing blackmail fantasy. And she actually like distinguished it because she had a critical moment where she ended up emailing. So a guy gave her an email because 99.9999999% of the time when a guy gives me his information, it's fake.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking it up. I'm not checking it. And in her not checking it, not saying you should check it, by the way. She just assumed the email that he gave her as his partner was fake, and she sent this information off as part of fantasy. And when I say it's a fake email, it's usually an email they set up pretending to be the partner so that they
Right,
can,
sure.
yeah. And it turned out it actually was the partner. And the partner messaged him back and was just like, I just want you to know this really hurt me. That, he keeps doing this. This is a bone of contention in our relationship. And I didn't ask to be a part of this. And this keeps happening. Now we can say whether or not this person should stay with their partner. That's another conversation for another day.
Yeah, their own messy relationship is their own messy life, and it doesn't sound like it was the the performer's responsibility here. But
Exactly. Yeah.
I do get how you can inadvertently step into somebody else. I mean, her consent was violated too here, right? Like she was brought in to somebody else's kink in a non-consensual way. But
Yeah.
you were, I guess, laying out the difference between like blackmail and blackmail fantasy.
Exactly, exactly. So it goes back to um making sure that you're keeping consent. And as you said, making sure that I'm asking a question. I'm not expecting a yes or no answer. I'm expecting a real answer. Being that, and when I read that blog post of it made me reevaluate stuff too, as okay, no, this can also not be a game, and you don't want to be involving other people that don't want to be there. But
Hmm.
outside of consent stuff, also, again, my ethics are, is it hurting someone? If it hurts someone, then I don't participate. um am I going to jail? Um, don't want to do that. Am I going to end up going to jail? Don't want to do that. It goes back to the, am I hurting someone? But also frequent check-ins. So it most role plays have a more dominant person to some capacity. The person,
Hmm.
or if it's not more dominant person, it's someone who's moving the play along, whereas the other person is kind of they're in for the ride.
Right.
um Not saying they don't contribute anything to it, but there's usually someone who is doing more of the guiding. uh,
Shaping it. Yeah. I mean, never forget your yes and. You know, your improv training is important here. But yeah,
yeah,
there's usually somebody who's sort of curating the experience.
exactly. And it is that curator, which 9 times out of 10 is me. It's my responsibility to constantly check in with that person. I'm not saying that they can't check in with me too, but I'm a pretty empowered person. I'm pretty good at being like, yeah, no. Um, I can also keep it sexy and do it. No. But I'm always checking in about every 15 to every 30 minutes. I'm doing small things to check. And I usually, actually, not even usually, I always communicate this beforehand of what my checks will look like. So that if you're feeling like I'm doing that, because I never, who wants to play with someone when they're just doing this for you?
Mm.
And it could have been their idea from the beginning. And now I feel like, okay, so I thought I was in ABDL, but I'm not. But we're here now, so we'll just finish out this role play, I guess. By doing those checks, you can kind of be like, oh, okay, maybe this wasn't for us, or that first bit was for us, and now we've gotten off into some area we don't want to be. So it can kind of put it back into put you back into the sexy without with making sure that no one leaves with any kind of regrets or any kind of bad taste in their mouth. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a big thing.
For sure.